My guest today is filmmaker Ali Marsh, who has worked extensively as an actress and voiceover artist for over the last 25 years. And her
Yep.
appearances in film, television, and theater have spanned from Seinfeld to Girls, from The Affair to sharing the New York City stage with Sarah Jessica Parker and Blythe Danner. Now, as a
Yep.
voiceover artist, she has been the voice of major brands from Toyota and Volkswagen to Friskies and Microsoft. But Ali also co-wrote, produced, and starred in two web series, Step Boss and Dr. Brock, with her husband, the actor Frederick Weller. And Ali also works as a court-appointed special advocate for New York City kids aging out of the foster care system. Now, she's here
Yep.
today to talk about her new short film, Pittsburgh, which is her directorial debut, a film that I really loved for so many reasons. So let's welcome writer-director Ali Marsh to the show. Welcome, Ali.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. So, what was the inspiration behind creating the film Pittsburgh?
Well, I will tell you that Pittsburgh is more or less based on a true story that happened to me. It was embellished, of course, and heightened and sort of milked for a little extra drama. But it is a story that I always told people because I thought it was very funny and affecting and pretty emblematic of the time period in which it's set, the late 1970s. Um, and it actually was a couple of scenes in a feature that I've been working on. Um, and it occurred to me somewhere along the line that making a short film would be a heck of a lot easier, and that I had a short film in there kind of ready made. So I just took different pieces of it and put it together and thought, you know what? I'm going to do it like this because it's just felt a lot more attainable, even though many people said to me, "You're crazy. You have an airplane, you have a kid, you have a hotel. It can't be done." Well,
Well, when I watched this film, part of me was like, I could see this as a full blown feature. The great thing about your film is it gives us the perfect arc for a short film without looking like a proof of concept. Because I can spot a proof of concept a mile away, but this one is both a real short film and could end up being a full-blown feature. So you think about going the feature film route with something like this?
that's the dream. That's the dream. And I thank you and I agree with you that I felt like there was a self-contained short film within it, within what I was working on, but also my hope is that people find the characters and the through line and the time period and the relationships interesting enough that they would like to see more. I know I would like to dig in deeper with.
That's okay. That's the thing that I really noticed. And so when I watched this film, I was sitting there taking notes because there are four main characters. You have 9-year-old Mintz, there's her father, the elderly woman, and the stewardess. Each one feels they have their own backstories to tell, and I like that feeling in the film. And then, so I watched the film the first time, and then I went back. I was watching it again, and I kept looking. I'm like, okay, there's so much here that's not being said, but there's stories that the audience is like, I would love to know more. So there are subtleties to the backstories that I noticed. So there was the father and the stewardess, that interaction on the plane. I mean, it reminded me that, the 1970s still carried on the sexual revolution. So I noticed that vibe between those two. Then the elderly woman, the grandmother, she was caring, she was protective, even to a stranger who happens to be a child. And then I loved how these elements are in the story without actually having to tell the audience. So, what was your thought process when it came to writing each of the characters' parts?
Well, it's so interesting. They each just felt so clear to me from the get-go. They just kind of appeared to me as these fully formed characters. I mean, the dad being the most complex, I think, and with the most backstory and sort of the most relevance to Mintz, being her dad. The stewardess, probably the character's name is Leslie, is probably the most two-dimensional, I would say, of the characters. Although, any three-dimensionality that was brought to that character, Leslie, or Gogo, the grandmother character, I really have to give credit to my actors, who I thought were, just marvelous. Because there's not that much necessarily written in there. I mean, there are little hints here and there, like Gogo says, call me Gogo. That's what my grandkids call me. So you know that she's a grandmother. There's sort of little hints dropped around, but I feel like the complexity of those characters, I really owe that to my actors being total pros, and also in creating those characters, as a writer, I think it's always about, well, what interests me? What do I find fun and interesting and weird and, you know, provocative?
What was so great about the four characters? Usually when I'm watching a short film, part of my brain is looking at the acting performance. This film I found to be a little bit more unusual because when I'm watching the film, I'm not looking at the characters as actors. They actually felt real. They, you know, um, they took on their parts, became those characters, and I really don't see that too often.
Yeah, again, I mean, I think, gosh, it's interesting being on this side of it, because having spent so many years as an actor and wondering, well, why didn't I get this part and why didn't I get that part? And I really felt like I did a good job on this part and that part. And realizing that so much of casting is about just finding the person who, whether or not they're acting or it's just within their essence or they're somehow able to kind of bring it up, but you just want to see the person. You just want to see the person inhabit the role. And so, I just got really lucky with my cast. And Delaney, of course, I mean, she's so magnetic on screen. She's such a pro. She's got an amazing career ahead of her. But my other three actors, Nadia Quinn, no relation to Delaney, Michael Esper, and Annie Golden, are all just veterans with so much experience and so gifted and so intuitive. And I felt like I barely needed to give any of them any direction. They just understood the vision from the beginning. So I feel so fortunate in that way.
Well, the father, when you really look at his character, he was really lonely.
So lonely.
You
Yeah.
know, divorced. He was, wondering what his ex-wife was doing because of the conversation he had with Mintz
Yep.
and him kind of hitting on the stewardess. Yeah, it was funny to think back in the 1970s because I remember like flying Delta or whatever. And, as a really, I think before I was a teenager and then a teenager, you were allowed to walk onto the plane and say
Exactly.
goodbye. Those days are gone. And
Those days are done. Yep.
yeah, and so it was really bringing back a lot of memories watching some of those parts. And then, you have Leslie the stewardess, and I mean, she's probably hooking up at every stop
I
she
think so.
makes a, you know. And then as for the grandmother, she's just being the grandmother. But
Yep.
but with Mintz though, I mean, I was really looking at her character because she was a bit wise beyond her years because
Yep.
she saw right through everyone she met.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things of, and in different ways, this is still true, although maybe less true than it was in the 70s, but kids really being left to their own devices and kind of having to figure stuff out on their own. The idea of parenting as a verb really didn't exist. And I think, there are those uh, turning points in a child's life where the fantasy kind of starts to fall away, and you start to see through people's personas. And I also think kids are so much closer to their instincts, without even necessarily knowing how to articulate it. But there comes that moment where the instinct meets the maturity, and she's not that mature. She's only supposed to be 9 in the film, but But maturity in that, like, you're at a certain point in your development, a child is, where they can start to synthesize information in a little bit of a more complicated way, and see through all the BS of the characters.
You
Yeah.
know, when I was watching Mints and and following the story along, I was wondering if that bit of wisdom in her came from dealing with her divorced parents who seemed to be a bit unsorted because when when her father was a little bit, I guess he kind of showed a little bit of jealousy when he found out that his ex-wife was seeing somebody. But then I got to thinking, Mince is with her mother most of the time. So is her relationships more like a revolving door? So Mince sees different men come and go because sometimes that sparks or it creates the wisdom in a kid going, something's not right here.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, the mother doesn't appear in the film, although should I be lucky enough to take it to the next step and make a feature, she certainly will be a character. And I can't say whether or not it's totally clear to me about what the mother is like, as far as whether she's got a revolving door of men coming in. Not. I do think, given the time period, and what I know to be true about that time period was that kids were often exposed to a lot more than they are today. Parents were just generally, I think, less emotionally protective of their kids. And I don't say that to, implicate them in any way, but I just think it was the sign of the times. It's just kind of, that was the me generation, right? I think that in the 70s, the adults were primarily worried about themselves. And I, not that they didn't love or care for their children, but it was just a different style of parenting. Um, yeah, I do think that Mince is very aware of her dad's loneliness and neediness. Um, which I think is expressed in the first scene when she's kind of trying to get through to him, and talking about the God rays, coming through, and trying to kind of shake him up a little bit and shake him back into, you know, the beauty of life. She fails a little bit, I would say, in that moment, but yeah, she certainly was going back and forth between the parents, and I think was seeing things she shouldn't necessarily have seen on both sides. And that kind of thing does force a kid to be a little bit wise beyond their years, I think.
Yeah, yeah, mentally grow up
Yeah.
before they need to.
Yep.
And and I loved the twist in the film because when the plane gets rerouted to Pittsburgh, which, ladies and gentlemen, that's why it's called Pittsburgh. So the plane gets rerouted to Pittsburgh, and Go-Go, the grandmother, she's like, you can come with me. And then the
Mhm.
stewardess is like, no, that's not protocol. You can't do that, which is great because, that would be a protecting the child. And of course, the
Mhm.
airline is responsible for that child who's flying alone. But then
Mhm.
you have the twist in the middle of the film where, Leslie's not doing her job, and then Mintz has to make a decision when she gets locked out of her room.
Yeah.
So I loved that simple twist and how you just carried the story to the end. It was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm really glad you enjoyed the twists and turns, because I mean, when I was watching it recently, I was lucky enough to show it at the Cleveland International Film Festival. That was our premiere, which was just last week. And it was very interesting watching the film in a room full of strangers, and, gauging their responses, and just like hearing different thoughts about it. And one guy came up to me afterwards, actually. I mean, he was kind of an oddball, but he came up to me afterwards, and he said, I was raised in the 70s and we didn't speak like that. And I was like, oh, okay, well, um, you know,
There's
that
no
was his.
difference in the way we speak in the 70s than we speak now.
I didn't think so, but
No.
everybody's got a different response to it, and it's definitely not structured necessarily that conventionally. So I think as far as people's expectations of like how to watch a short film and what is this journey that I'm going to go on, it varies. So, but for the most part, I got very, very wonderful feedback, and people enjoyed the twists and turns. So I'm glad you did too.
Well, yeah, because the great thing is this film was not predictable at all. And, it kind of reminded me a little bit of, Home Alone, where Kevin ends up on the wrong plane. And,
Forgot that I
but,
haven't seen that one in so long.
you know,
That's my, yeah.
but, for a short film, it was so cool because it's not predictable. You don't see any of the twists or turns coming. All four characters stand on their own. They interact with one another. There's a synergy there to the whole story. It's relatable to a lot of people. So the film from beginning to end is just fantastic. And one of the things that caught my eye, and I'm sure it caught many people too, where did you film the interior of the airplane scenes?
Yeah, that was that was an adventure. Um, One of my producers was able to. There's a soundstage in Brooklyn, in New York, that has maybe 8 or 10 different airplanes, all different models from different times, and they have been turned into sets. They are full planes, but like they were, the walls were widened so you could fit a dolly track down the aisle, for instance. There's no cockpit, although I think there were some sets of actual cockpits that just didn't have the body of the plane attached to them. Um, but yeah, we were able to secure this plane, and that was the plane that was used actually in the television show Manifest, and also in the recent season of And Just Like That, when I don't know if you watched that show, but Carrie flies down to visit her boyfriend somewhere, and that's the plane they used for that. Um, and it was a kind of generic enough looking plane, like not a super modern plane with no screens embedded in the seats or anything. So we were able to kind of,
Well, it had
nip
the
and tuck.
70s look to it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we replaced the runner that goes down the aisle, with kind of a '70s feeling, and then we replaced the little what do you call them? Like little fabric on the headrests, with a pattern that looked very '70s. So, and the signage, and that was about it. The rest of it, was just the body of the plane that looked like a plane.
Well, you captured the 70s perfectly in this film, but tell me about the cinematography because like I just said, you nailed the time period perfectly.
Thank you. Well, I do feel like I owe my DP, Jared Levy, huge and probably all the credit for that, because he also really understood the look and the vision and the colors and the aspect ratio, just everything about how I wanted to look. He really was on board with it. And the two of us we worked really hard to get it right, and when you're super invested in something, like the specificity of something, it's just so fun to be surrounded by, crew members, my DP, and I mean everybody really, but of course the set designer and the production designer and the costume designer, like everybody was just super excited to bring to life that period. It's such a rich period, visually speaking. Um, and so distinct, so unlike anything else, that I just think we all really had a blast creating the look of it. And I do think I mean, I'm so grateful that I found Jared, because he's a brilliant cinematographer, and he really helped me get the job exactly where I wanted it to be. So
Well, the color grading of the film is wonderful, and it actually gives
yes,
the audience
that's
the feel of the
incredible.
1970s.
Yes, Jake White, an absolutely wonderful colorist who Jared got for me. And he also was really gung ho. And I kept wanting to push it farther and farther in that direction. And I think, both Jared and Jake were kind of hesitant to go quite as far as I wanted to go with the color grading. But they agreed, they went with me. And in the end, I feel like we nailed it.
Oh
So,
yeah, the color palette was pure 1970s.
yeah.
I I was almost wondering why you didn't film this in 16 or 35 millimeter.
Well, that's a good question. That would have been my dream, but this being my first film that I've ever directed and produced, um, it just felt a little too challenging. And I think probably it would have been a lot more expensive to do it that way. And I think it's just there are fewer and fewer crew members and people who know how to work with actual film, because it's just not the standard anymore. But if I ever have the chance to make a movie on film, I mean, to me, there's nothing like the look of film. There's just nothing like it. I mean, digital nowadays has it can do incredible things, and you can really replicate that look, but I don't know, something about just the actual grittiness of the film rather than having to layer that on top.
Yeah, I know some people that will take their digital footage into post and add the little bit of touch to kind of
Yeah,
give it the film look, and it does,
yeah,
and usually it looks good. But
yeah,
yeah, with this film, I wouldn't change a thing because I mean, right off the bat, I was noticing the color grading, and even when the opening scene, you have the mid 70s T-Bird, it is a perfect addition. I mean, I'm looking at the neighborhood in the
yeah.
background.
At
So,
that neighborhood, it was crazy. We just found this one block that really looked like it could be any time, anyville, USA. And we just had to go around and ask people to hide their cars for a few hours. Um, and people on that block, on that, what was it called? Iris Court in Teaneck, New Jersey. Everybody was so lovely and nice and willing to move their cars and work with us. And yeah, it was sort of miraculous that we pulled it off.
well, it even made the background easy for you because it was basically a chain link fence in a vacant lot.
Yes. Well, that's why we chose that spot. Yeah. That's exactly what was it.
I love that. Well, I know that you had mentioned all four cast members. So, how was the casting process for this film? Because, you know, Delaney Quinn, I mean, she just recently starred in If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. So,
Yeah,
she's got
she
a
did.
big career ahead of her.
She sure does, and she's also in this movie that I think is going to come out soon. That I was able to see at the Cleveland Film Festival, a feature called Buddy. Um, I can't remember the name of the director. I'm so embarrassed to say that, but he's kind of a cult director. He does like horror, comedy horror, that genre, which is not a genre I usually am necessarily that interested in. But I saw the film and it was great, and Delaney really carries the film. She's fantastic, and it was so much fun and a total hoot and scary, but fun scary. Um, and yeah, so Delaney came to me through my casting director, who from minute one was like, "I have your girl." And I was like, okay, but I still think I should have auditions because, it was the very beginning of the process, and I had never worked with a kid before. And so I really wanted to hold auditions. So I had tapes of 60 girls he got me. And, a handful of them were excellent. I mean, they were all very good, but a handful of them were, really, really great. But Delaney was just far and away the standout. And I was like, oh, well, you were right. I didn't need to go through that whole process. Delaney's my girl. And she just was magnificent. I thought her face is it's such a 70s face, really, with those freckles. And, there's just something about her face that the camera just loves. And she's so expressive and not afraid to kind of be still, and quiet and let you see the thoughts behind her eyes.
Yeah, that's the important part because in a lot of short films, if you have minimal dialogue, you have to see what the character is portraying through the eyes, the thought process, the facial expressions. And she nailed it. I mean, I think she was perfect for this part.
I agree. Thank you. I really agree. She was, yeah, just a blessing to work with her.
So how'd you find the other three characters or three other actors?
So the other three, Michael Esper, I kind of knew from just around town. He's a New York theater actor, and a friend of mine had done a play with him, and somebody suggested him, and I was like, oh yeah, he's perfect. And just cast him. I mean, he didn't audition or anything. And same with Nadia Quinn, who I actually knew Nadia from, she sings in a band. There's a band called the Middle Aged Dad Jam Band. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's got a little bit of a cult following, and my friends are the founders of the band, and she sings with them sometimes. Look it up, you'll like it. They sing all like hits from the 70s, and they're amazing. And it's all filled with people who are full-time, actors and just happen to be great musicians or directors, writers. Anyway, Nadia's in that band, and someone suggested her to me, and I didn't even know she was an actress. I was like, oh, she's a singer, right? And my friend said, no, I did a movie with her. She's an actress. And I said, great. And I just called her up and asked her to do it, and she was perfect. And Annie Golden, that was the toughest role to cast, actually, because it's just hard to, she's such an established actress, and it's hard to ask, older people to do a short film for very little money and be sweating in the middle of, a sound in the summertime. But luckily, actually, I went to a couple of actresses who it was really just a matter of who I could think of that would be great for the part. And I think there were two or three other actresses who all said, "Oh, I love it. I love it. I want to do it so badly. I can't. My husband is having hip surgery," or like there was always some reason that the timing wasn't right. And then somebody suggested Annie, and I was like, "Oh, perfect, perfect, perfect." And she read it and she wanted to do it. And once again, it's one of those situations of things just kind of working out for the best.
Well, I also loved the music score. Using original songs from 1979 brings back a lot of memories.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I had a music supervisor who helped me with that opening song, which it's just a random song from the 70s that I had never heard, but I think it's really great. And then my very dear friend, Craig Wedren, who is a composer, he composes for film and television, and he's also a rock star in his own right. He has a band called Shudder to Think. He composed the interstitial music and the score, and I thought he's so brilliant. It was just perfect. It really supported everything going on in the film.
Well, now that you premiered at the Cleveland International Film Festival, have you been selected to others?
Not yet. Unfortunately, I have not yet received. That's not true. I have gotten a couple of other invitations, but um, I turned a few of them down because of premiere issues. Like I wanted to premiere at Cleveland as opposed to X Festival. Um, but yeah, I'm kind of just at the beginning of my festival journey, so waiting to hear from a bunch of places and hoping that it'll show at least somewhere in LA and New York, and maybe somewhere in the South, somewhere in the Midwest. Well, it did its Midwest, I guess, but I just want as many people as possible to be able to see it and see the beautiful performances and all of the great collaborative work that went into creating it. And then hopefully someone will see it and say, "Hey, I love these characters. I love this voice, and let's try to make it bigger."
Well, I agree with you. Premiering in Cleveland is a very, very big deal. And, I believe that when you fill out film festival submissions, they usually ask if you've appeared somewhere. And to me,
They do.
that carries a lot of weight by premiering in Cleveland. So I would expect to see this film at many more festivals throughout the year. But I have to ask, how did you get into voiceover work?
Oh, um, gosh, I've been doing it for so long, less so recently, but I got into it originally, actually. A friend of my mom's had an advertising agency, and I met with him, and he said, I think maybe I could help you get an agent because your voice has a good quality. And so he did help me get my first agent, and then I just started booking stuff. So I really lucked into that situation through a family friend, and I had a really nice run doing that for many years. And then in the last couple of years, it's been harder to get voiceover work, I think, because more and more AI, maybe non-union actors. I don't know, but it has sustained me for many years, and I'm super grateful about that.
Since you bring that up, because I know that actors are worried about AI. Directors, not so much. Um, but the voiceover situation, I know there's a lot of editing programs
Mhm.
that you can create voiceovers with. But in your opinion, is AI voiceovers, what is it lacking?
Humanity, ultimately.
Yeah, yeah.
Flaws, the natural sort of flaws in the human voice that I think, like a lot of the bigger campaigns that I did, like the Volkswagen one, they were looking for that kind of grittiness. They wanted that kind of grittiness in the voice. Same with Toyota. And I don't know. I actually don't really know. I'm sure the unions are fighting hard against AI in the voiceover world. And I don't know for a fact that it's being used, but I suspect that it probably is because, it's a whole lot cheaper than a union actor. Um, but I don't know. I just have to hope for myself and all my friends who work in that field that we can continue to contribute our voices and our just human experience that ideally will surpass what a robot can do. Although it's worrisome, is worrisome.
Yeah, it's funny because, you know, all of the guilds are fighting against AI, but you have those that are investing in it because they know Pandora's box has been opened and
Yeah,
it's never gonna be closed.
exactly.
With Ben Affleck for one, actor, director, writer, and then sells his own AI company for 600 million. You're straddling the fence,
Yeah.
and I think it makes it harder on the guilds to fight against it when you see something like that happening. And like when I'm looking at reels on Instagram, for example, I follow so many film people. I know what they're saying, but then you get these reels that are completely AI generated. And then I would go to the comments, and all the comments are like, can we just get rid of the AI? Because now it has flooded social
Yeah.
media in a very, very bad way. I mean, I have people going, hey, they send me something and they go, look at this. And I'm like, it's AI. It's not even real. So stop believing that crap.
Yeah, it's funny that you should say that because it's a skill, recognizing AI that I have not totally figured out yet. And my daughter kind of called me out on it the other day because I was showing her some Instagram reel or something, and she was like, "Mom, that's AI. That's not a real person." And I was like, "What? No, it is a real person." And she was like, "No, look at the way her mouth moves. Look at the." And so, it takes a beat to kind of catch up and be able to identify what's AI, but it is everywhere. And as you say, the toothpaste is out of the tube. There's no putting it back. And I don't think any one of us really knows how it's all going to pan out. But
Well, the thing that I see is with film, we need the human element in every aspect because AI comes out way too polished to the point to where it doesn't actually look real. Now, I've seen some done, you're just like, and it blows you away, but there's still that polished look. And we need to
yeah,
keep the human element in the writing, the acting, the directing, down to the post production. And I understand that even the Academy is allowing some uses of AI in post in the areas of maybe audio correction, a little bit of color
yeah. I mean,
correction, but not too much. They're trying to put a limit on it because I understand, there's so many elements in post production, and you know that.
yeah. I mean, it's a tricky balance because on the one hand, it can serve us in a lot of ways and save us time and save us money and all those kinds of things. But it's just hard to know where the line is. Of course, we don't want anybody to lose their jobs and people who've trained for years and have so much experience under their belt, and they're always going to be able to bring more to it, I think. But Yeah, as you say, it's creeping in, and we just have to figure out how to make it our friend, not let it, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So for you, what's after Pittsburgh?
That's a great question. Wish I knew. Uh, well, I am going back in and putting my attention on the feature script in the hopes that that will be the next thing. As far as acting, I don't know. I'm around. Anyone want to hire me? I'm
Just doing
available.
self tapes.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of self tapes. Not that many, but a few. And yeah, I'm just tending to the rest of my life a little bit at the moment, and doing writing, and also trying to I have a partner that I didn't work with her on Pittsburgh, but we had a TV show that was in development at Warner Brothers for a while, and it looked like it was going to sell, and then the pandemic came, and then all kinds of things happened, and the strike, and the it kind of fell apart, but we really loved working together, and so we're looking for another project that we can collaborate on together, and we're both kind of actively seeking that out.
Oh, fantastic. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Ali Marsh's Pittsburgh is both a period piece and a coming of age story, all rolled into one. In its 1979, and a scrappy 9-year-old Mintz is eager to wrap up a visit with her needy divorced dad, and Mintz's solo flight home is rerouted to Pittsburgh, where for one chaotic night she is left in the care of a boozy stewardess and a hard-nosed granny, and as she witnesses the unreliability of the adults around her, she becomes her own protector, leading her to make a pivotal decision. Now, Pittsburgh is a wonderful film and it captures the absolute essence of the late 1970s in every detail. The decor, the wardrobe, the storyline, the cinematography, and the color grading is spot on. And I'm keeping my eye on this film during its film festival run. And I want to thank you, Ali, for sharing this incredible film with me today, and much success to you and your whole team.
Thank you so much. It was great to talk to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Oh, absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, you can watch or listen to all of the Bond on Cinema interviews at bondoncinema.com. Check out our Prime show, our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, iTunes, and more. And remember, you'll either see me at the movies or from the red carpet.